Hello. Welcome back to Full Time with Meg Linehan. I am Tamerra Griffin, joined as always by Meg Linehan. And while this is a non-denominational show, I just need to note for the record that I just so happen to be wearing a red sweater. Meg is decked out in forest green. We are ready for some holidays. Meg, how are you doing? Good to see you.
I'm good. I'm wearing forest green in honor of UVM. Yes. UVM winning the men's Final Four, unseeded team, traveling 7,000 miles. Yeah, it's been the talk of the town in Burlington, Vermont, to say the least up here.
Congratulations. And I have to admit, I was actually watching that game, and after Marshall scored, I thought the game was over. And
they're known as the cardiac cats, because literally it was like, the 81st minute in the final. The game before it had been the 82nd minute that they scored. That was just
unacceptable
their way.
Mistake on my part. I didn't even find out until the next day because, I don't really be paying attention to men's soccer like that. And I was just like, dang, the one time it was exciting. Yeah. Well, not the one time. But anyway, congratulations to Vermont. And somehow we are at the end of the year. I can't believe it. But what better time, right, to have a special mailbag episode. Thank you so much to everyone who wrote us in all of the ways that you did, whether it was some type of DM on social media, an email. Maybe we even received some by carrier pigeon. I'm not sure, but we appreciate all of the thoughtful questions. They were so creative, so critical, and we're excited to dig into as many of them as we can. But first, we would be remiss. We would not even be able to stand by the name of this podcast if we did not talk about the GOAT, the legend, her, Becky Sauerbrunn, who announced earlier this week on Tuesday that she is retiring from soccer. Meg, this is something that, of course, everyone knew was coming, but like so many things that are hard to let go of, you're never quite ready for it. I mean, it's Becky Sauerbrunn.
Yeah. I really thought I was going to be very emotional about her retiring, but I think after some discussion, after the news, I think Alex Morgan and the way that she retired, I think kind of rewrote a lot of people's brains in terms of, okay, like this is kind of, for the most part, the end of that older generation of players that really drove the 2015-2019 team. And Becky obviously has been such a huge part of that. But I think the other part of this too is, whether it's Sam Ewis, whether it's Alex, whether it's Megan Rapinoe, like we're getting all of these retirements of this generation, but they're not going anywhere. So the sadness is like, I will miss them on the field, or I will miss them in certain soccer situations. But I'm just like, we're going to see so much of you. It doesn't... Like, I can be sad for a minute and, like, thank you for that career, and it was so special, and, like, I have loved covering Becky Sauerbrunn in every form and every single... Like, if you want to talk about the most thoughtful answer of questions on the face of the planet, it's Becky Sauerbrunn. So, like, I have loved every minute of that, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't really have to be that sad right now, because you're all those answers are still going to be around.
Absolutely. And this is a very glass half full interpretation, building on what you said, but that is such a beautiful sign of the growth of the game too. I mean, there was a time where a player would retire and they would sometimes like disappear into obscurity, probably not always of their own like desire. But the fact that there are so many channels for former players to pursue, to continue their careers, even if they're not playing anymore, is a really encouraging sign. And I personally, I said this when Alyssa Nair announced her retirement too, and I'm basing this both on the way that they answer interview questions and sometimes also the way that they craft their retirement announcements. But Becky is a writer. Okay, because that post, it was evocative, yes. It was emotional, it was open, it illustrated so like beautifully these like key moments throughout her career that are both like specific to her and universal. And I just was like, please write the memoir, please.
Truly.
Or the novel. Just write. That's what I'm hoping for her.
The key to being a good writer is a good reader, and we know Becky Sauerbrunn is a good reader. So, of course, she has this. And, like, just the perfectly delivered media role. What was really funny is, she is not a player that has ever loved the attention. I was at her 200th cap game, right? Like, This is someone who's always just kind of like, I do not want the spotlight on me. And so to kind of have this, like, thoughtful rollout without the farewell game. Like, it honestly took me probably an extra 10 or 20 minutes after she had announced to realize, like, I was at her final game ever. Because I was at the Portland Thorns playoff loss against Gotham, and I was like, oh, I was at her final game.
Wow.
Like, okay, we don't get this goodbye, but I was there. I just didn't know. So at least I have that from
crazy.
A personal level to cling to. But it is, I think, very Becky too, of she did it on her terms. It feels like the right time. She knows, I think, what she wants to get into. I think obviously the media space is something that interests her, but I mean, she really, if she decided that she wanted to stage a coup of the NWSL and become commissioner the next day, like, I think women's soccer would just basically be lining up to be like, how do we make this happen?
And happily too.
Yeah.
I mean, she has always been that kind of leader. And I remember seeing a tweet or a Blue Sky, I can't remember what the platform was, but it was from Claire Watkins at Just Women Sports, who pointed out that an older quote of Becky's was that she didn't want to be missed but remembered, which, I mean, again, bars.
Yeah.
Becky Bars Sauerbrunn, I don't know, just throwing it out there as a nickname because she was dropping them. But that is such a beautiful way to even reflect on your career while it was still happening. And I really do think that is going to be the case for her. So yes, flowers. And as we'd hoped, many of you did write in your mailbag questions for us to discuss Becky more, which we will happily do in our next segment. But there is still another major news item that we need to discuss that also touches on something that a lot of y'all have been asking about regarding NWSL expansion. Sounds like we have an answer to that, and it's in the Mile High City of Denver. Yeah. Meg, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I was able to confirm with a source that basically it is in the final stages of these conversations around making Denver the 16th team, which, I think they had 3 really good, strong final bids between Denver, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. And so it is kind of interesting that they've gone with Denver, but I think it makes sense for the NWSL, setting aside maybe what these teams are saying in terms of specifics around venue or whatever. Denver's a youth hotbed, right? And we've known that. And we've seen the talent that has come out of Denver, whether it's Lindsay Horan, Sophia Smith, Mal Swanson, right? Like, Denver has the youth soccer scene on lock. So first, good landing spot for a pro league. But I also think it's a good location because I think the Midwest has always kind of been this, kind of lighter area for the NWSL, East Coast heavy to start. And then we've gotten 3 California expansion teams after having none. And so the question was really where in the country makes the most sense to put another team now that you've got Boston incoming on the East Coast. And so putting Denver next to Utah, right, it gives that kind of, okay, now you've got this away trip swing for a lot of teams to come through. And I think that does really make sense. But Denver, I mean, I was just out. Emma Hayes had her debut game as U.S. Women's National Team head coach. 19,000. It was the doubleheader with the U.S. Deaf Women's National Team, too. Like, really good crowd. We have seen really good attendance figures in Denver for a U.S. perspective. That doesn't always translate to the NWSL, but it is, I mean, it feels like a very promising spot for this league.
It does. And making the connection between the historic strength of their youth leagues and the fact that they are looking to be the 16th team to enter the NWSL really does, and specifically when you put that in context of questions that have been swirling around the league around the importance of investing in youth academies and really building this pipeline between that and the fact that the league has abolished the draft, it really prompts further questions about these longer term plans for the league and how they're sort of strategizing that. I think that we can sort of read that in these tea leaves too, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big questions that people are probably thinking about, and to be fair, this is not necessarily even a new problem for the league as it stands, but if there is this potential of a calendar swap for the NWSL, Denver is not exactly a market that's going to make that swap any easier, but neither is Boston, neither is Utah, neither is Chicago, right? Like, they have a whole bunch of teams that they're going to have that same problem with, so it feels a little rough to judge Denver for that. But I want to say the other thing that I think people should really be watching out for is Colorado is a blue state, has protections for women's rights enshrined in their state constitution. And I don't think the NWSL would ever outright say that was a factor, but it does kind of feel like it was probably a factor.
I mean, it's interesting because, of course, I'm thinking of the question that you asked Commissioner Berman at the NWSL Championship, which looked at that same issue, but from the how are we protecting against attacks, potential attacks, and real attacks, as we've seen already on players. But I totally agree. And sort of the issue with not answering those questions directly is that we do have to interpret things like this in the ways that we will. But Denver, Mile High people, let us know how you feel about that, because this was a bit of a plot twist for me, but as someone with extended family in Colorado, I'm super here for it. Last bit of news, the NWSL transaction moratorium begins this Friday, December 20th, and runs until the 27th of December. Also, before we get into our next segment, I just have to give a shout out to Leah Griffin. She joined our full-time fam midway pretty much through our season and really hit the ground running, making sure all of our socials were not only sparkling, but growing. She watered them. She was giving them all the good sugary plant food. And I think that it would be really nice to show her some thanks by giving us a follow at TA Fulltime on Instagram, TikTok. Make sure you're following us on YouTube. We're always putting great content on there because we know you can't get enough of just one show a week. Now, when we get back, we're going to dig into this mailbag. All right, it's mailbag time. Once again, thank you, everyone who wrote to us with your questions. I know how much time it takes to even come up with a question. I spend a lot of my time doing it as a journalist. And so we don't take this lightly. And we really, really appreciate how closely you guys have been listening to the show to even come up with some of these questions. And we're going to try and get to as many of them as we can. So in honor of Becky's retirement, Meg, what better way to kick off this mailbag episode than with a question from Claire? Most goated Becky moment. She even was gracious enough to give us somewhat of a multiple choice, which I will share. Writing a letter to the U.S. Women's National Team to give the NWSL a shot. Apologizing for winning the 2019 NWSL Defender of the Year award. Refusing to take a pity penalty kick to score a U.S. Women's National Team goal. Bleeding her own blood in a World Cup final. Or dealer's choice.
Yeah, I mean, these are all just such good options. It's really hard, I think, to pick a defining Becky Sauerbrunn moment. Though honestly, I think I might go number 5, dealer's choice, because her writing a letter to the editor for her local newspaper defending trans kids' rights to play sports, that to me is the Becky Sauerbrunn ethos, right? But on the field, I will say, bleeding her own blood in a World Cup final. And also just all of her photos with the cut above her eye, holding the trophy with blood on her. Listen, when she inevitably gets voted through, if she does not get 100% on that first Hall of Fame ballot, that jersey has got to go in the Hall of Fame. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. Ideally with maybe a few blood droplets just for
they got
just for posterity.
Yes. Do you have a Becky moment?
Yeah, I was actually going to go with bleeding her own blood. And shout out to Claire for the wording on that. Yes. I meant to even make a note in the Google Doc of these questions. Just for the opportunity to repeat those words, I have to go with that. But for me personally, because some of these moments they're personal, I was at the 2019 World Cup final, and I was not there as media. I was there with friends. We were on a France trip, and I was like, hey, we might as well just go to this game while we're here. And of course had been following the U.S. Women's National Team for decades at that point. But there's something about when I just think about experiencing that moment in real time, you don't always realize how crazy and intense of a moment that was, and just her decision, the authority that she had to just take herself basically to the locker room and pop back out. Unforgettable moment. And then of course the fact that they capped that off with a World Cup championship made it all the better. So definitely bleeding her own blood for me. Yeah. Specifically the wording of that too.
Totally fair. We also got a question from Kelly H. It's a 2-parter. The first one is, what is your famous almost Becky goal from the national team?
I don't have a catalog of all of the almost goals, so I feel like I might be taking the easy way out with going with one of the more recent ones that I believe happened against South Africa in Chicago when she almost scored a header.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There was also the one, I think everybody's probably thinking about the one in St. Louis where like it was basically designed for her, right? Like, I mean, what is really funny is obviously she never she was just like, listen, if it happens, it happens. First of all, I'm not taking a penalty kick, as Claire pointed out. But like, do not try to pity me with like sending me up the field. So what I always did as my favorite, I'm not a great EA, FIFA player. But what I would do is, first of all, I always have to play on like the lowest possible setting or like the second lowest. But I would just be like, I am going wild attacking center back run and sending Becky Sauerbrunn all the way up the field for a final shot. And I would post them and like, it's just truly... that to me those are my famous favorite actual fake Becky goals.
I like that you're including EA in that, because I feel like a large portion of playing sports video games is like
wish fulfillment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So you're playing the game right.
Yep.
So the bookstore coffee shop, I was thinking this is one of those like when you're making your own coffee in the morning and your mind is just kind of wandering. I don't think she would actually...
Yeah, we have to actually read the question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you read it. Sorry.
No, sorry. Okay, so question number 2 is, what should Becky name her bookstore/coffee shop in Portland that she inevitably opens?
I love this question, and I had a lot of fun thinking about what this might be. There is a part of me that could see her wanting to do some sort of play on words that incorporates soccer, even though she 100% seems like the kind of person who is like, that was one period of my life and I'm ready to pivot to another one. But I could totally see, especially in a city like Portland, something like Touch Grass Bookstore or something like that. Or like something that incorporates somehow like a pitch.
Yeah.
But not as explicitly, because she's super classy. Like, she's not going to be that literal about it. But I'm thinking like Touch Grass Bookstore or a coffee shop would also work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my guess is like maybe naming it after her cats. Like, that's kind of what I could see her going for. I could not come up with a good pun, but also like Becky does not really super strike me as someone that would go for the like full on, like, can you come up with a book/coffee/soccer pun that somehow hits all three? But she feels like someone who's kind of like, it is what it says on the tin. Yeah. It is a books and coffee shop. Right. You will get what I advertise. Thank you very much.
Very straightforward. And you got to respect that. Get what you pay for when you enter.
100%.
Meg, are there any questions that are speaking to you next?
All right. I mean, let's maybe move. First of all, I do want to say we got so many more questions about Boston. Everything Boston, NWSL. I know that is what everybody is still thinking about Boston, about the name, about the stadium, all of it. But we've hit on Boston so much. So we're going to put something in the show notes to say, like, go listen to these episodes if you want more Boston stuff. I know we will be talking about it in 2025. There is no question in my mind, but we kind of need to let things brew a little bit more before we really get into it. But yeah, I think the name is going to change. That was really the main question that we got. So like, just hang on there. Let's maybe go to a quicker one with, do we think that we see the same teams finishing in the NWSL top 4 next year that finished top 4 this year? So that means Orlando Pride, Washington Spirit, Gotham FC, and KC Current. Because I think this is a really interesting one.
It is. And my simple answer is no.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
I will not be surprised if I see the Spirit at the top of the table again. Now, this might be some recency bias because they just made a big signing with Narumi Miura from the North Carolina Courage, which was very exciting to me. I described it in our group chat as a demon time signing.
You did.
And I stand by that. But I also admit the recency bias there. But I also think that the Spirit in the latter half of this season really entered this like new gear that if the season had started then, it would have been a totally different story.
That and plus like their injuries, right? So it's
right.
Like two pieces to that. But yes, totally agree. Like for me, Washington Spirit heading in, I don't really believe in power rankings, but if I were going to power rank teams heading into 2025, Washington Spirit for me is at the top of the list.
Right. And I know that the question was not, thankfully, who do we think will be in the top 4, because it's way too early to say. Kat, thank you for being gracious and realistic with that question. But yeah, my short answer is no. Between the NWSL chaos and yes, while this season did show us that when you do invest in your coaching staff, when you invest in your club, and especially in a long-term sustainable way, it will pay off in dividends like hand over fist, as we've seen with the Orlando Pride, with Gotham, with Kansas, with all 4 of the top 4 teams from this past season. The other side of that is that everyone else in the league has been taking like fastidious notes, and I'm sure have just been eager to apply them into their teams for next season. So I think that means that no 2 seasons are ever going to be alike, especially now. But yeah, my short answer to that is no, and with good reason. And like I'm happy about that.
All right, Tamerra, you go next. Find a question for us.
All right, let's sort of related to that. Do we think that any of these teams are going to have this like jaw-dropping blockbuster trade coming?
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely a good question from at O'Briggs on Instagram. And I mean, I feel like the thing that everyone is kind of waiting for is not necessarily someone coming in right at the moment, right? We don't have a Gotham FC happening this offseason. So I think what people are kind of waiting for is what happens with Naomi Girma if there is a transfer brewing, right? And this maybe relates to another question that we got from, there's no way for me to say it out loud, but another user on Instagram. It looks
like an acronym?
Yeah, with maybe an acronym name CSYMRL. But where does San Diego go from here given all their upheaval, right? And so maybe these two questions are a little bit combined, because I think there is a sense of, we've seen some movement incoming for San Diego around the youth movement. They've been going for those college signings. But to me, the big question is like, what kind of offers is San Diego getting in the transfer market right now for Naomi Girma, considering kind of her 2024, right? I fully expect to see her be named the player of the year for U.S. soccer. She's already gotten some other awards love. I mean, famously left off the Ballon d'Or list, but you know, like she's the it girl right now, I think, from an international point of view. And so I think there's been a lot of attention in England, maybe in France, about potentially her moving overseas. And so that to me is kind of like the number one big ticket thing I'm watching, not necessarily someone incoming, but that's not to say anything about the quality of the league, but I think the question for me is, does Naomi Girma feel like she's going to like be able to continue developing her career in San Diego? And that's a much bigger question that we really do not have time to dig into today.
We don't. And we have all sort of been collectively anticipating this $1 million transfer fee, to hit women's soccer. And I think for a long time, people were sort of expecting that to maybe be Sophia Smith, which it might still be. Mm-hmm. But of course, that was before things started to go very, very south at San Diego. And to your point, Naomi is really hitting that, what classically is a peak in a player's career. She is slated to be the captain of the U.S. women's national team. With the exit of players like Becky, the like red carpet has been rolled out for her. And what does that mean in terms of the professional career moves that she has to make? So I totally agree. Whose turn is it? I already forgot to pick the next question. Is it mine?
I think actually, you know what? Let's pause because we've got a perfect chance here. We got a couple international based questions, and we have actually roped in one of our reporters from the UK, JPH Jesse, to tell us more about what Scotland and Ireland have to do to get back to a major tournament. Scotland's last tourney was the 2019 World Cup, Ireland 2023 World Cup. Both have missed out on Euros during the playoffs. They've both fired coaches. So these questions coming from Karen. So let's pull in Jesse now so that way we get the answer right from the best possible source we could.
So there will be no Republic of Ireland or Scotland at Euro 2025. Both teams making the decision to part ways with their managers after they lost their playoff finals leaves both teams in an interesting position. Scotland obviously went to the 2019 World Cup but haven't qualified for a major tournament since. Ireland were at the 2023 one. With Scotland, it's a bit trickier, I think. They had Pedro Martinez Losa in charge since 2021. He was handed this 4-year contract last year, which felt bizarre given the quality of football that Scotland had been playing. A real concern about how turgid his team could be. Also worry about his inability to bring in and develop younger players within the side. So I think for Scotland, they're looking for someone who could maybe really maximise the talents they have at their disposal. High quality players like Erin Cuthbert, Caroline Weir, but who are really, coming into their peak years at the moment. And Scotland want to make the most of them while they have them. Ireland, it's a little bit different. Obviously, they went to this 2023 World Cup. Vera Pauw left after that tournament, and obviously her managerial style and reputation is a little bit controversial. Eileen Gleeson came in, Pauw's assistant, someone who worked with the Irish FA for a long time, and really, I think, just brought this group back together. You saw that from the Instagram post from players after she left. So they are looking to start from the same cycle they are looking to start for a new cycle as well. But I think just coming off a slightly different position, whereas for Scotland, it really feels like they've almost wasted quite a lot of time at this point. And for someone who comes in, you want them to bring a new culture, who are ready maybe to interact with the Scottish FA and help bring Scottish international football to the level it can be with the players they have at their talent disposal. I think it's a job that's going to involve managing up as well as down, and it'll be interesting to see who both teams go for.
Now that we've heard that, let me find a good question for you, Tamerra. Let's maybe do a little U.S. women's national team, because this is a good one from Kat, too. Do you think that there will be an overhaul of the U.S. women's national team midfield in 2025?
What a steak and potatoes question. I mean, so I don't think that the midfield needs... When I think of overhauling, I'm thinking of like wiping the slate clean and starting afresh.
Maybe even formation change.
Yeah,
right?
Something like fundamentally different. Mm-hmm. And I have not ever really thought that that's what this team needed. I do think, and this is sort of my hope, that Emma Hayes will be realistic about the combinations of the partnerships that have been emerging, that have proven to be successful. I hope that she begins investing in younger players to be able to step into these bigger roles, particularly at the 10, the 8, these huge responsibility decision-making roles, so that there is an actual pipeline and, someone to pass the baton to when players like Lindsay Horan are nearing the end of their careers, thinking of hanging up their boots. We are beginning to see that. And from the beginning of the season of even this show, we have discussed when Emma Hayes arrived, the very challenging timing of all of that, needing to prepare the team for the Olympics, help them sort of heal still, maybe a little bit from the World Cup, and begin to plant the seeds for how she is going to implement her strategy, her style in building these various pipelines. So I don't think that there's is or needs to be an overhaul per se, but I am expecting in 2025 specifically, honestly, there to be some hard conversations about what's been working and what hasn't been in the midfield, because even when the team is playing well, there have always been questions about the midfield and its efficiency.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's going to be interesting. Obviously, 2025, the biggest project is figuring out who the number one goalkeeper is going to be. But I also think 2025 is this start of the cycle year where qualifiers are still a year away. World Cup is still 2 years away. And Emma Hayes will get a chance to maybe, hopefully with a healthy Catarina Macario, get some more significant minutes there. Hal Hirschfeld, get some more minutes there. But also you have Lily Johannes, right? And is she ready to step into a starting role in 2025? Absolutely not. And I think Emma Hayes would be one of the first people to say that. But there is a sense of you have these players that give you something different from the 3 that we have seen in the midfield for, basically a year to 2 years now at this point. And so there is maybe a question of are some of these combinations going to give you different tools or different looks for what this team could achieve? And so yeah, I don't know if like overhaul is the right word, but I am hoping to see experimentation in 2025.
I like that, experimentation. This next question that I want us to touch on, Meg, combines some international football with awards politics, which I know you have many opinions on, as do I. This one came from Ken, who asks, don't you think Tamerra Chewinga should be in the FIFA Pro World 11? Darren also had questions about that, and he said, the FIFA Pro World 11 is a terrible list, and, quote, it tells me that players aren't watching much soccer and just going off reputation. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I don't know if I disagree, right? I mean, I think that is the challenge of just like, are they good at playing soccer, or like are they soccer heads who are watching all of these other games? Because I think that is a fair question to ask. I mean, I think that's a fair question to ask of anyone who is voting on these awards, of like, what are your areas of specialty? How much are you watching? Like, this is why every time I get asked to like vote on some sort of international list, I'm like, no, no, thank you. Cause I don't do enough. Like, I have so much work just covering like the US women's national team, the NWSL, and this little world right here, that to then be like, do I feel comfortable saying I know where a player from Roma should be on a top 100 international? Absolutely not. Right. So I think there is, like, you have to really do a lot of homework to vote for lists like this. And so FIFA Pro in particular, I think, has always kind of been one where it's like, yeah, you can see some of these things carry over and the reputation is there. Tamerra Chewinga, I mean, Tabitha Chewinga has gotten all of these year-end lists and not Tamerra. So I think that has been interesting. But I don't know if it's like an outright snub. For me, the same way Naomi Girma, right, not being in that blonde deal. Like, there are some where it just, like, feels so obvious where I am, like, I get why everybody's really mad about this. Whereas, you know, Tamerra Chewinga in a best 11, I don't know if I would necessarily go that far. Should she have been in the NWSL best 11? 100%, right? Like, not a question there. An international one, I think that is actually, like, legit debate.
Yeah. The thing where I am now with these awards, and if you guys pay attention to them, you know that there is an onslaught. Like, we are just bombarded with...
Every day there is a new award.
That's how you know you're getting to the end of the year.
Yep.
But at this point, I'm almost more fascinated by what the awards and the selections reveal about whoever voted than the actual selections themselves. And so I'm looking at the forwards who were listed in this FIFA Pro World 11, Lauren James, Barbara Banda, Linda Caicedo. Of course, if you watch the Olympics, you were able to see Barbara Banda ball out. But I have to imagine that some people had to have been following the NWSL to know what she was doing with Orlando Pride to feel that she deserved that nomination. So for Tamerra to be left off of this list, to me, we have to go a little bit further than, whoever is voting just doesn't watch NWSL, because I have to assume that they were.
Yeah, like, is it a pick one? Do voters feel this thing of like, okay, I can't have two NWSL forwards in the same best 11, and so if I'm going to pick someone between Barbara Banda, who also had a good Olympics, right, / who just won the NWSL championship, versus Tamerra Chewinga, I think like that is a fair thing for people to look at Barbara Banda and say like, okay, international and club combined, here we go.
Right. Or someone like Lauren James, who did not even play in the Olympics.
Right.
But, you know, when she does play, is balling out for Chelsea. I know hasn't been getting as many minutes in the latter half of this year. But no one will ever be 100% satisfied with these lists. We know that. Part of the reason I think that they exist is for us to debate them like this, which honestly I'm happy to do, because there's always something to say about them.
Yeah, it's definitely... All right, we got another kind of bigger bundle of questions here too that I think is a little more meat and potatoes in terms of like...
Sorry, vegetarians and vegans.
Yeah, sorry.
We'll come up with some more inclusive metaphors.
I mean, you know, you can have... We'll say vegan pot pie, right?
There you
Love
go.
a good vegan pot pie. Can you give us more details on the college player signing process since the removal of the draft? Will we see more investment in NWSL club scouting departments? That one from Cheryl. Add on, do you know how much importance NWSL clubs attach to watching a player in person, from Felix? And then we got a whole bunch of questions kind of like right along these lines from Nick. So like this was a real common theme. And what is interesting is like, we're still waiting on the final document for the CBA to kind of maybe set some of these things in motion. We have not seen the 2025 roster rules from the NWSL yet. But I mean, Tamerra, it really just boils down to like every college player is now a free agent, baby. Like it kind of is the wild, wild west right now.
It really is. It really is. And I love that for them. I followed as much as I could the College Cup. I unfortunately was super consumed by NWSL and Olympics this season. U.S. women's national team to be following the college game as much as I would like to. But I have to say I was a little bit surprised at how little conversation there was around the College Cup, given what you said about how all of these players are essentially free agents. I mean, the quality has not dipped. And I think between that and the ink still kind of drying on how the structure of this is going to work, I think is going to make these next couple of months extremely intriguing. I will say, if Cheryl and Felix and Nick and everyone who wrote us about the state of NCAA into NWSL were not aware, I don't know where to start. I'll just start again. Yeah. I will say to Cheryl, Felix, Nick, everyone who wrote into us about the NCAA to NWSL pipeline in this draftless era, we're not aware. The San Diego Wave have already started signing college players. So they are in the market. They're signing contracts. They're getting started. I know that this is just going to be the beginning, but I'm sort of seated along with everyone else as far as how this is going to go, partly because we're still waiting on
I mean, the airplane is truly getting built midair this off season. And so I think the part about investment in scouting departments, like, yes, 100% that's going to be a major part of it. I know NWSL also just hired someone for an analytics role in the front office. So like we are starting to see these investments, but this first class of signings is going to be really interesting just from like the market being set in terms of value and where people are rating. What I think is going to turn into a premium, honestly, is youth national team experience, especially for the US, right? Like that feels like NWSL teams can maybe rely a little bit on some of the work that US soccer has already done to scout and know that these kids are in that system. So I think we're going to immediately see like a lot of signings of players who have youth national team experience, because that's going to feel like a little bit more of a safe bet for a lot of folks.
Weighs a little heavier on the CV.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think it's going to be a longer journey into the shift of whether it's seeing kids go from high school to the NWSL, right? Like we're not going to get a whole bunch of Olivia Moultries or, any of that sort of movement in a huge, massive sense right off the bat. But I do think the landscape, we're in that first year of a shift here where, we might see more kids leaving college early. Will there be that sort of, there's only so many places though to go until, teams 15 and 16 get off the ground. So, but from a logistical standpoint, it is pure free agency.
We love it. We love especially the agency part.
Yeah.
And yes, I feel like so much of being involved in this league is riding in the plane as it's being built, for better or worse. But we appreciate the questions. We, of course, will stay as abreast as possible. And as always, you can be tuned into The Athletic's writing about this as well, because we are at the very beginning of this journey. All right, Meg, I was a big fan of the Miscellaneous section of these questions.
Let me start with you. I want to ask you this first one because I know as soon as you saw this question, you got so excited.
My heart started
want
fluttering.
I want to cue you up because Brett from Atlanta, I think, replied to the newsletter with this very epic question that Tamerra was just like, I am so ready for this.
Speaks to me on so many levels.
Here we go. What is the plot of your ideal Hallmark Channel women's soccer movie? Would a retired World Cup winner move back to her hometown and fall in love? Would a player be hit with a surprise trade, looking at UKC, front office, and have her life thrown into chaos? What soccer pun would you use for the title? Tamerra, hit us.
First of all, Brett, I think that if any like Lifetime movie execs or Hallmark are listening to this, they need to scoop you right on up because the examples that you gave were amazing. And I'm going to do my best to sort of meet you where at the very high bar that you've set. I actually thought about this while taking a shower this morning, where all of the best creative ideas are born. And I'm going to go a little bit left field and say that our protagonist is a former player turned referee who was outcast by the women's soccer world. This is a pre-VAR era where they made a terrible call that ended up totally shifting some like major championship game and was like hated forever, and moves to this small town where nobody knows about their history, becomes a coach, and does the whole, lifting the small town team with no confidence to victory. And let's say they fall in love with the like equipment manager who's like secretly like a strategic genius or something. That's maybe borrowing a little bit from Ted Lasso, that character. But that's sort of that's where the show
I was
is.
really expecting this to go in the direction of like the player, like, whose goal she called off is the like, you gotta get that like enemies
enemies to lovers.
Yeah.
How could I have been so...
You gotta go for the trope, man.
I was trying too hard. No, I love that edit. Thank you for that edit. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Did you have a title in mind?
Maybe it's because of the season, but I was also thinking of this being like a holiday movie as well.
Yeah, it has to be a holiday movie.
Okay, cool.
Just checking. Like we're straight up, this is holiday movie time. Okay,
so working title, Sideline Slay. Because, they're going to be coaching, so they're on the sidelines.
Yes.
And I don't have to explain the slay part.
All right.
That was like 5 minutes in the shower. But I'm happy to workshop. Brett, let me know what you think. I'm eager for your notes. But
I mean, I think you're ready.
My submission.
It doesn't even have to be a Hallmark channel. It could just be, like the romance books are really popping right now. You just got to get a little illustrator for the cover. You're good. You're good.
I can picture it now, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking, I think one of the most underrated holiday movies in the Hallmark genre is this one called Round and Round with Vic Michaelis, who it's actually technically a Hanukkah holiday movie, but it is a time loop romance movie, kind of in the Groundhog Day tradition. So I was like, just give me a good time loop romance. Again, like if you haven't seen like Palm Springs, also that genre, I'm very into those in general.
Notes.
But for me, it was, the outcome of a game being rewound time and time again until the player gets it right. And then finally, like one teammate kind of realizes that it's being repeated time and time again. And so, you get it all. I'm still workshopping the title. I'm open to thoughts on Blue Sky or wherever, maybe we'll post this. I feel like this is already like way too long for a social clip, but like this is clearly where both of us thrive.
And it's really hard to give things a title. Like
it is.
Coming up with a headline
that's
to a
the
story
last piece of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, you got to put on the playlist that you build first. Like the first step is playlist build, then it's writing, then it's title. So we've got to work our way through that.
But Brett, excellent question. Thank you so much. Katie wants to know, and I love this question because it calls back to maybe one of the first, like, no pun intended, breadcrumbs sort of that we dropped on the show. But Katie wants to know what our preferred cheeses are for our charcuterie board.
Yes. Katie, I think, is the first person that, like, yes, she is our, I mean, unfortunately, in my head, Katie, you are our charcuterie fan. That's not a terrible title, but, like, that is how I mentally refer to you. Obviously, as a Vermont resident, I feel very strongly about Vermont cheeses. We have many to choose from, but there's a whole bunch of places that have a local maple goat cheese, chèvre. And so that is guaranteed to be the first thing on the cheese plate. And then followed by, like, get a nice little Jasper Hill. They've got some good ones. Cabot, obviously, a standby. We finally went to so Cabot is like a co-op, and they have a whole farm store between us and the way back to Stowe. So, like, after a ski morning, sometimes I just hop on in there. You eat a little free sample. Get some cheese. Living the dream.
I love that. I did not know Cabot was a co-op. Just one more reason to adore that brand because I've long known about the cheese. I love that for you, Meg. I was gonna say goat cheese as well, but just to have some variety, which you always needed for a good charcuterie board, I am gonna go with a manchego. I've been really feeling manchego lately. I spent some time in Spain a couple of months ago. And what I appreciate about it, I think my taste buds have been changing in the last, kind of ever since I turned 30. And I find myself appreciating the briny presence on a charcuterie board more than I ever have. And I really appreciate the way a manchego goes well with, a Spanish olive, a briny, cornichon pickle.
Okay.
But it's creamy. It has a tang. It's good on its own. Of course, you can pair it with a cured meat. But yeah,
very versatile.
manchego for me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Extremely versatile.
That's what you need. That's what you need on a charcuterie board. All right. Last one is from a friend who wanted so desperately to remain anonymous, but will not. Good old Jenna Tonelli asked me on Instagram, who is your favorite person to sit next to in the press box? And obviously my answer is Jenna Tonelli. But Tamerra, I don't know if you have a favorite person to sit next to in the press box that you like to, there's always, you gotta, anytime that you can choose your press box seat, because sometimes it gets assigned. So
yeah, often it's assigned. So I want to cheat a little bit and give two answers because I feel like you never forget your first. And it just so happens that the first person I ever sat next to in a press box while covering women's soccer was our very own producer of this podcast, Theo Lloyd Hughes,
Love
at the
that.
2022 NWSL Championship in DC. I had, of course, known him over social media, so it was great to make that face-to-face contact. We had a great time. I remember him wearing this, incredible, sparkly eyeliner. I don't know if it was from him, hugging someone and it rubbed off, but I just remember being he's even cooler in person than I thought. So that will always be a sweet memory. But I also really like sitting next to Jeff Kassouf from ESPN. I love hearing his little, under his breath, observations about the game. He's always got a million notebooks going.
yeah, he's a notebook for
he's a
life,
notebook guy.
man. Yep.
Mm-hmm. He's always on top of it with the replays.
Yep.
You just feel like you're always covered.
Yes.
Sitting
100%.
next to him. So those are my
100%.
two answers.
All right. I love that. I feel like that's such a good place, some love for our fellow reporters.
Our pals.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again to everyone who wrote. We're sorry we couldn't get to them. There were so many questions, but we love that. We love that. And we hope that doesn't keep you from continuing to write to us. Even in the off season, we want to know your thoughts. There's always going to be news happening, more free agency signings, more expansion news, maybe more retirement announcements. Who knows? But we
Please
always...
stop. Please
I know,
just
I
please
really
stop.
shouldn't. I really shouldn't. I take it back. But write to us anyway. Please, please, please. We love hearing from you. For real, for real, for real. Meg, I feel like I'm about to do that thing that I sometimes do at parties when I know I need to leave but don't want to. So I'm just lingering.
Yes.
Because this is our last episode of this year, of the calendar year. But we have things to do. We got to get out of here. Let's talk about Euros before we do, though, because on Monday, December 16th in Switzerland, the groups were drawn. They're set. We actually have narratives to build around these numbers, group of death designations.
Yes.
What were your initial thoughts when you saw how all of this sort of played out?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of group of death, I think everybody immediately looked at Group D, which is France, England, Wales, and the Netherlands. And first of all, sorry to Wales, but Group D, man, there's so much happening in that group. But I think it is, there are some good matchups. I think a lot of the big games got put in bigger stadiums. Michael Cox actually did a draw analysis for us, which obviously he's very much more the expert than I am in terms of what we should be thinking about for these narratives. But France, England in a group stage is tasty. I'm ready for it.
It feels almost wrong, but I feel like there's always that one group where
it's like
dang.
USA, Sweden, right?
Yeah.
Being in group stage all the time.
Exactly.
You've got to have that one where you're like, why is this happening now?
Sometimes you're just tethered like that.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to be provocative here, but I'm looking at Group B, and
Yes.
I'm looking at Spain's recent form, they have not been nearly as dominant as they were at the World Cup, at even the last Euros. And I'm looking at Portugal. I'm looking at Italy specifically.
Italy. Italy is the team that I'm circling of. I mean, I feel like Italy has had that dark horse designation for a few tournaments now. But Italy's form as of late, you know, they played Spain to a draw. They've been getting some wins. Like, I would like to see Italy's women's national team really perform on the international stage, and we see some real investment from Italy into that program, because they're doing it without real money right now.
Totally. And since we shouted out Jenna, it would only be right to shout out Audrey Tonelli, who is Jenna's wife, and who covers Italian women's soccer very, very closely. If you're not following her, please make sure that you are, because you will learn a lot, as I know I have. I will give Group D the Group of Death title. I will concede that. But I am giving Group B the title of the Chaos Group.
Yeah, it's like the group I want to watch.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, totally. I mean, Switzerland, obviously a pretty favorable draw in Group A. I mean, the hosts always, Group A tends to always kind of be like, okay, good for you. Germany, I think being in that same group as Sweden is kind of interesting in Group C. But yeah, Group B for me, Group D for me, those are the two where it's like, who's going to advance out of here? And I want to have big, high expectations for Italy. So like, that's where I'm at for Euros.
I love that. And I will say that, not that we are necessarily pro prediction in this house, but I do like that, for me at least, there is no clear dominant team in this Euros. If this past calendar year has been any indication, they've all been, for chaos factors, delightfully inconsistent. Yeah. And it's really going to come down to who. Honestly, I'm looking at you, England, France, Spain specifically, and actually Germany too. It's going to come down to who is able to get their shit together by next summer at this point, because I'm really not convinced at this point by any of these teams in terms of their ability to dominate this tournament, which only means it's going to be an amazing tournament.
Yeah, I want chaos. Let's go.
Let's do it. All right. Until then, though, we need to rest. It's the holidays. It's time to take a break. So over the next 2 weeks, you are going to be hearing some special full-time episodes looking back at some of our favorite moments of 2024. We're calling these best of compilations, and they will be dropping in your inbox at the same time as all the other ones have on Thursdays. So that'll be December 26th and then Thursday, January 2nd as well. Look forward to those, and just know that in the meantime, we will be with you spiritually, but also resting spiritually and also physically and emotionally, hopefully.
Yeah, we have a lot to recover from this year. And we will also be having the full-time newsletter. Again, if you have not subscribed to that, we will be having regular newsletter episodes through the holiday period. So 2 more issues through the end of the year. And yeah, apologies in advance. As of Wednesday, December 18th, in theory, I am off for the rest of the year. Whenever I use the V word, chaos happens. So either like, sorry for what goes on, or you're welcome in advance, depending on what the news is. And also just like one final programming note, you might have seen on social media, there's some role changes for myself and for our executive producer, Emily Olson, but that doesn't mean that the podcast is going anywhere full time. We'll obviously be back with you in 2025. And it's actually now kind of my number one job function. So podcasts aplenty for everyone.
Major new signings for 2025. We love to hear it. And congratulations on the new role, Meg. And to you, Emily Olson, I know you're listening. I cannot wait to see how this podcast continues to grow. It's been such an adventure from the moment we started until now. There has literally never been a dull moment. Even as we speak, there are not dull moments happening. Yes. Just trust me on that one. But we have been riding this chaos roller coaster for a whole podcast season. And I have had such a blast doing this with you, Meg, with you, Theo, Leah, our producers. I've learned so much. We've had a blast. We've been able to record a whole episode in person together.
I know. Yep.
Memory book stuff right there alone.
Yep.
And we could not have done it without all of you, our listeners. So from the bottoms of our hearts, we owe you the hugest, warmest, juiciest, cheesiest thank you for listening, for riding with us, for trusting us, for joining us every Thursday. Whenever you've been listening to it, we appreciate you so, so much. And for those of you who celebrate, wish you the happiest of holidays. This show is not possible without our podcast producer, Theo Lloyd Hughes, our video producer, Leah Griffin, and our executive producer, Emily Olson. Like I said, we will be in your feed for the next 2 Thursdays with our 2024 Best Ofs. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me working on my Hallmark movie pitch.
That's going to be your off-season project right now. Tamerra Griffin is going to be publishing a book / like getting the movie rights arranged. Yeah.
Got to. But yes. I will be doing it with some Spike Tot chocolate, most likely.
Okay.
Send me your recipes on Blue Sky and Instagram. I'd love to hear them and sample them, of course.
Yes. Again, thank you so much for listening all of this year. Obviously, relaunching the podcast has been a real project of love and work and all of that fun stuff. You can find me on Blue Sky, on Instagram. Again, I will be on the slopes here in Vermont enjoying the winter. But thank you for listening to us, and we will be back in your feed next Thursday.